This is everything you need to know about pulleys for either a physics class or for real life. If you ever have to lift something heavy or pull a car or something out of the mud. I'll start with the simplest example first. Single pulley. Here's your mass that's 10 pounds or 10 newtons, 10 kilograms, whatever. The tension will be the same throughout the rope. So if there's 10 pounds pulling here, there's 10 pounds pulling here. There's no mechanical advantage here, meaning this is what you call 1-to-1. But pulling down on a rope is much easier than pulling up. If you're pulling down, you're using the back muscles, the latissimus dorsi, and those are very large muscles that are strong. If you have to pull up on something, you have to use the deltoids, which are the shoulder muscles that are much smaller. So even though there's no mechanical advantage, it's still easier pulling down than pulling up. So this pulley right here is helping. I used to live in a house with a storage loft in the garage, and every year it took two of us and a fairly tall ladder to lift a very heavy, large Christmas tree that was in a cardboard box. We had to lift it up into the loft. So whoever was on the ladder had to somehow hold onto the ladder with two hands while using two more hands to lift the box up into the loft. It was pretty scary and dangerous and unstable, and it was a concrete floor about 8 or 10 feet below us. So I found out I could just put a hook in the ceiling, hang up one pulley. I could just sit up on the loft by myself and have the rope tied to the box down at the bottom, and I could pull it up by myself in about 5 seconds. Before that, it took two of us about 5 minutes with considerable risk. So yeah, pulling down is a lot easier than pulling up. Also, depending on the forces involved, you may want to use a through-and-through bolt instead of a screw hook. We had a porch swing screw hook fail on us a couple of times when I was a kid. So maybe the hooks were just a little too small, I don't know. But if you wanted to go up into the attic and screw some reinforcements onto the floor joists or the ceiling joists, then that way you could run a bolt through the reinforcement boards, and then that way the weight could be supported by a bolt and a washer instead of just a screw hook, so that might help. And if you drill a hole through the reinforcement boards instead of your floor joist, then everything will still remain up to code. Now to assess the forces, simply count the ropes. There's one rope pulling up on this weight right here, so that's why it's 1-to-1 mechanical. Not really mechanical advantage, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. When people say count the ropes, they're only talking about the rope that is pulling up on the weight. Ever since I was a kid, I heard count the ropes, but nobody ever specified which ropes it is, or which ropes you're supposed to count. So here, if you would count 2 ropes to make it look like it's twice as easy to pull that up. But just count the ropes with the up arrow pulling up on the weight. If you have 10 pounds of force pulling down here with the weight, you're gonna have 10 pounds of force pulling up. Always draw your arrows on your ropes. Those are your tension arrows. Always draw them pointing away from your anchor points. This would be like an anchor point. That'd be an anchor point. The tension has to be the same throughout the rope. So if you have 10 pulling down here, you're gonna have 10 pulling down here. That gives you 20 pounds pulling from the hook on the ceiling. And let's see the other caveat. Assume here that the pulleys have no friction and have no mass for this math to work out, because if the pulleys, in real life, the pulleys are going to have friction. So you'll have to pull a little bit harder than what the math indicates. And if you have pulleys down here on your mass and you have to lift up the pulleys, some pulleys can be pretty heavy. Here's a 2-to-1 mechanical advantage on this pulley. You can actually start from the puller, the person that's pulling right here, or the winch, or else you can start from the mass right here that is being pulled up. If we start from the person, this person is pulling up 5, and you have to have the same tension throughout the rope, so that if there's 5 pulling away from this anchor point, there has to be 5 pulling away from here. That gives you a total of 10. Or you can start with the mass, which is 10, divide it by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5, so each rope will have 5 pulling on it. This means there will be 5 units of force pulling that hook from the ceiling. There is a mechanical advantage here, but it is more difficult pulling a weight up than pulling a weight down. Also, for these diagrams, I didn't draw the ropes completely vertical, but you want to assume that the ropes are completely vertical. If this rope is being pulled out this way, this will increase the tension on the rope. I'll give an example of that later on. Now we can take this same setup right here and just throw it over another pulley here. So now we get to pull down using the large latissimus dorsi back muscles, so pulling down will be much easier. I guess you could think of it this way. It's easier to do a pull-up where you pull yourself up to a bar than having a person lay on the ground that has the same weight as you, and you actually have to pull that person up off the ground. So if you're pulling down with 5 right here, 5 of tension, draw your tension arrows away from the anchor points right there. 5 pulling down here means you have to have 5 pulling down here. That's 10 pulling that bolt on the ceiling right there. You need to consider those numbers if you're ever going to hang something up and you're going to put a screw hook into a ceiling or a bolt. So we have 5 pulling up right here also, 5 pulling up here, 5 and 5 is 10 right there. So you can start from the person pulling, or you can start from the mass. 5 pulling down, so that means you have 5 pulling down from the hook right there. Count your ropes, 1, 2, but specifically you can only count the ropes that have an up arrow pulling up on your mass, not the rope here. If you miscount, you could do 1, 2, 3 and take 10 divided by 3, but it's actually 10 divided by 2. Having pulleys gives you a mechanical advantage, but you have to go through more rope. Here we can remove the pulley and remove the mass that was hanging off a pulley. We have 20 feet of rope, goes down 10 feet, goes back up 10 feet on this ledge. Pull up 10 feet of rope and just cut it off for this thought experiment. So now we have a 10-foot rope. 10 divided by 2 is 5, which means you'll have 5 feet going down and 5 feet going back up. So we only have to pull up half the weight, but we have to go through twice as much rope because we pulled up 10 feet, but 10 feet of rope, but we only raised the weight 5 feet. And the more times this rope wraps around pulleys, then the more rope you have to go through with this same principle. We can get more complicated here. We can start at this end where a person pulls, or we can start at the end where the weight is. I'll start at the end here where the weight is, pulling down with 20 units of force. Count the ropes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't count that one because it's only these ropes right here that are pulling up on the weight. 20 divided by 4 equals 5. 5 units of force pulling up on each segment of rope. And that is because we have the same tension throughout the rope. If you're hanging a pulley system, you'll need to assess how much the force is on the bolt holding everything up. You can count the ropes here. There's 5 pulling down here, 5 here, but also 5 here, here, and here. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. 25 units of force pulling on that bolt right there, or that screw hook. So 25 units of force here, but compare that to a single pulley system right here. There's going to be the same 20-pound weight, or 20 Newton weight. That means 20 units of force is pulling down on this segment of rope, 20 on this. Then you're going to have a total of 40 pulling down on that hook right there that goes into the ceiling. So 40 compared to 25. Having more pulleys will decrease the amount of force on your ceiling hooks. I just said right here that this could be a ceiling. If right here, that could be the ceiling and we're looking at a wall behind this setup. Or this could be a bird's eye view and we're looking down at the ground, and this is a truck right here that we're trying to pull out of the mud. This will give you a 20-5 mechanical advantage or a 4-1 mechanical advantage. So it depends on how deep your truck is stuck in the mud or the snow. If it was just on a slick surface like some ice or something, it wouldn't take much force, but if it's buried fairly deep into the mud, like up to the axles or something, then yeah, you're either going to need a lot of pulleys or a lot of people or just a winch. I drew this diagram wrong, but I decided to go with it and show you what was wrong with it. We can pull down with 4 units of force right here. I'm going to work it backwards this time and start with the person instead of the weight. So 4 is pulling down here, 4 is pulling down here, 4 and 4 is 8. 8 units of force on that screw hook. You're going to have the same amount of tension throughout the whole rope. So there's going to be 4 pulling up here, 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 and here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 times 5 equals 20. Thus we can pull up 20 units of mass, 20 pounds, kilograms, newtons, whatever. Let's look at the force on this screw hook right here. That's going to be 4 here and 4 here, but it's not just 8 because these are pulling down here too. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 units of force pulling down on that screw hook or that bolt. Okay, so how I messed up on this was these ropes are supposed to be vertical. I started getting sloppy here and I put that one at an angle. You can imagine here if you're holding a weight, you could actually just have one hand here and one hand right here and have a weight hanging in the middle, or you could have you stand here and a friend stand right there. If you're both just standing here and the ropes are vertical, you're both going to support half that weight. But now imagine how hard you have to start pulling out on these ropes and how much extra tension you have to put on these ropes to start pulling these ropes more horizontal instead of vertical. And if you want to pull on these ropes as hard as you can, this rope right here in the middle will still tend not to be completely horizontal. You'll still have some upward angle there, showing that unless these ropes are vertical, it is going to increase tension on your rope. You can use basic trig to find out how much tension is on that rope just by drawing your vertical angle up, but that's a whole different subject. So I just said here, this is tension 1, that's tension 2. Tension 1 is greater than tension 2. I had a box full of pulleys and I used to play around with them in the backyard. You can do a setup like this if you want to, where the rope just winds back and forth. I'll start from the weight end this time instead of from this force end. If you have 10 pulling down here, that's 5 and 5 pulling up. Same thing right there. You'll have 5 units of force pulling on that hook. 5 and 5 is 10 pulling on this hook. 5 and 5 is 10 pulling on that hook. I drew the dotted line here showing that these could be separate weights, or it could just be connected with one long weight, or one large weight that was connected by 2 pulleys. The problem here is, in real life, you're going to lose some friction as that rope pulls through each pulley. Imagine each pulley being like right here and right here. Imagine this just being a tree branch with really rough bark on it. So you can pull super hard right here, and you're not going to get hardly any force pulling up right here because there's going to be so much friction on that rope right there. This is actually very intuitive for me because when I was playing around with the pulleys a lot, sometimes I'd just throw them over branches. And yeah, if you had some rough bark right there, then you could pull really hard here and you can't lift very much weight right there at all. So that's just an extreme example. I always think in extremes when trying to solve some sort of math or science problem like this. So say you pulled on with 100% of force here, you might only get 90% pulling up here, 80 there, 70 and 60, because every time it passes through a pulley, it's going to decrease the force. What will happen then is this pulley is going to get raised higher than that pulley. You can actually get a really intuitive feel for this if you just have a place where there's a couple of parallel bars, just smooth metal or smooth plastic bars you can throw a rope over. I did this with just paracord, and I had these smaller bars right here. I just ran my fingers right through here, and my fingers are going to be high friction surface compared to a pulley. And then I pulled down on this rope right here. This finger got pulled up a lot. This finger right here barely got pulled up. And I actually had another pulley over here, so I could have 3 fingers running through the pulleys. This finger on the end had no force on it at all, almost none. Almost all the force was right here on my first finger being pulled up. So I just said here, this one raises up higher. There's going to be decreased tension with each pulley every time the rope passes through a pulley. I've actually seen 2 videos on YouTube that said if you tie a rope to the front of your truck right here with a winch, and the rope actually goes out in front to a system of pulleys that goes back to the back of your truck, you can pull yourself forward with the winch and actually pull yourself backwards with the pulley system. That's not true. I'm just showing this part here because I saw 2 videos that showed that. What's going to happen here is this rope will just get shorter. Say you have 100 feet of rope right here and you start pulling it in with your winch, even if you want to use a pulley right here or have no pulley system. And you can really obfuscate things well by putting in a whole bunch of pulleys in different places too, if you want to make, to increase mechanical advantage, to make it look more confusing. But in the end, if you pull in 10 feet of rope, that rope's going to get 10 feet shorter. And so it's going to pull the winch off the truck here and pull the trailer hitch off the back. Here's an intuitive example. Wrap some pulleys around. Oh, by the way, these pulleys are attached to trees. I didn't really show that, but I figured it's obvious. Do the same thing here. You can have a pulley on a tree here and here and here, and just pull on both ends of that rope, and you'll find out that whatever you pull here is going to pull the same here. So yeah, you won't go anywhere. The only way this would work is if you want to pull yourself backwards with a pulley in the front of your truck. If you could just run the pulley underneath the truck to a tree right there, yeah, then that could pull you backwards. Another option that wouldn't pull you backwards is if you had a pulley coming down here, say straight sideways right here, and it could pull the back of your truck sideways, which might get you out of a difficult situation there, like pulling you out of some mud or something. But pulling the wheels sideways like that, I don't know what that would do to the alignment if there's a lot of force on them. But at any rate, yeah, this doesn't work. A couple of examples here just for fun to give us an idea of what's going on. Right here we have a whole bunch of pulleys, but there's no mechanical advantage. We have a pulley on the ceiling here, and one on the floor right there. So as you can see, there's no mechanical advantage. If you pull down 10 here, 10 newtons of tension or 10 pounds of tension, you're going to get 10 on each rope. So yeah, you might as well just use one pulley. If you do want to get fancy and have a mechanical advantage here, this is kind of a fun little thought experiment, I think. I'm going to start with the person on this end that's pulling down 5 units of force because there's just so much going on. If there's 5 right here, that means there's going to be 5 here, 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 and here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 times 4 is 20. That means you're going to have 20 pulling on this pulley right here that's attached to the floor. So that means you'll have 20 on this pulley, 20 here pulling down, so that'll be a total of 40. By the way, I didn't say here that this is 25 units of force here. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 pulling on that pulley. But now we have 20 pulling up here, 20 pulling up here, and 20 pulling on that screw hook from the ceiling right there. So 20 and 20 is 40. So we have a 5-to-40 ratio, or you could say 8-to-1 ratio on that, which means you'll go through 8 times as much rope, but you can lift 8 times more weight if you ignore the actual weight of the pulleys and the friction of the pulleys. And by the way, I have some pretty heavy duty pulleys that probably weigh over, I don't know, 5 or 10 pounds each. So if you have a lot of pulleys right here as you're pulling down, you have to pull these pulleys up, you have to pull that pulley up. So yeah, if you have heavy pulleys, then this will increase the load a little bit.